Guess what? Sergers and overlockers are not actually scary or overwhelming. I'll share with you the easy way to know how to adjust your overlocker for your projects. First, let me show you around so you know what each part does. The serger or overlocker has a straight stitch on the left side and two threads that wrap over the right edge of the fabric. It has a cutter or knife so that this edge is smooth and equidistant from the left side of the stitch. Overlockers also typically do a wider serge finish requiring 4 threads or a rolled hem finish requiring 3 threads. Since I work with hemming formal wear, I always keep mine set to rolled hem, or R, as you see right here. This is the narrow baby or hanky hem edge. You'll hear it called all sorts of things. So rolled hem, narrow, baby, or hanky hem edge. It can have a satin finish that looks very nice and it flows well. I'm going to take a deep dive into how the knobs are arranged and adjusted to make your overlocker a machine that works for you in an instant instead of driving you crazy. Let's start from ground zero. Begin with a new machine with the tensioners set to mid numbers, stitch length set to R, or rolled hem, and your machine set up for the 3-thread rolled hem setting. You'll only have one needle. That's the one on the right. Make sure that needle is fresh. Now, if you are not dealing with a new machine, you're resurrecting an older model or a gifted machine with a questionable past, have it serviced before you begin. The tech will make sure the knife is sharp and the tensioners are all calibrated and the machine is in time, as they say. You want to make sure that you're not being frustrated by issues that actually need repair and not just adjustment. Most overlocker machines have the knobs split into 2 sections. The left and right can be in a straight line, or the left 2 and the right 2 can be almost a little bit diagonally divided into 2 separate sections. So I want you to think of this into groups of 2, okay? The 2 on the left, the 2 on the right, or divided diagonally, kind of your upper left and your lower right 2. When I have my machine tuned up and perfectly adjusted for my most commonly used fabric, I circle the tension settings. Yes. I literally labeled my whole machine. It helps me and it helps the seamstresses who work here. It gives us some clarity about the functions and we're all kind of speaking the same language. So across the room, I can be like, oh, wait, for that fabric, go ahead and dial it back to this or that number. And they've got all the knobs and everything labeled. So it's really handy for us. And I recommend if you have a machine and it's yours and you're into labeling, if you ever have some confusion about, oh, I always get these knobs mixed up, just go ahead and write on the thing. The police are not going to show up and take you away for this, I promise. Now, here's what I'm going to call my home base tension settings, okay? This is for most lining layer hems that I would do at my shop. So this is like a bridal fabric lining weight kind of fabric that I would be putting through the machine. All of these knobs, the way they're set right now and marked and circled. If one of my seamstresses were to just sit down to the machine with one of our normal fabrics that we work with daily and put everything on its default circled settings, it would sew just fine. That's the goal here. You do you. And I understand if you work alone and you're not into labeling stuff, you absolutely would not want to do that. It's just a lifesaver here. So the next part that I want to talk about is how do we remember the individual functions of each knob and then how they affect one another. So when you're looking at the face of the machine, the top left knobs, they go to the top left side, okay, of this little flat sewing surface down here with the needles and all that. It's the top left knobs go to the top left side. Needles on overlockers are straight and they go up and down. The straight needle makes a straight stitch. All right, that's some ways you can remember that. Left knobs go to the left side, The straight needle makes the straight stitch. Now to the bottom right two knobs, or the far right two knobs, depending on how your serger is set up. The bottom right knobs go down into the subway under the machine and into the loopers. Now loopers are L-shaped, okay? L for loopers. They're L-shaped, and they are the type of needle that wrap the threads around the fabric edge, okay? Loopers loop the thread. That's how you can remember that. There's no loopers up top. That's just those straight needles that go up and down. The loopers are on the bottom, and they're kind of like little hooks that move back and forth. So moving from left to right, looking at the knobs on the machine, once I get the straight stitch knob set correctly, I leave it alone. I only adjust it to loosen it a number or two if the fabric is really thick, because it needs more thread to travel through the fabric, or if I'm going for a fast long stitch to really cover some ground to basically prevent the fabric from fraying, but it's not really going to look all that pretty, then I'm going to loosen it a little bit for that sake. Now for adjusting the looping or the wrapping threads. These knobs are the ones that are on the right. These knobs work just like water hoses and faucets. Your daddy was right when he taught you low to loosen, high to tighten, or lefty loosey, righty tighty. I prefer the low high because they correspond with the number value. So I like to say low to loosen, high to tighten when you're dealing with numbers on these knobs. Of these two knobs, the left one goes to wrap the top and the right one goes to wrap the bottom. It connects to both the underside of the straight stitch and also the top looping thread. The goal is to get these guys to weave together along the very edge of the fabric. Get this, if your knobs are calibrated right and your straight stitch tension is right, you'll almost always have these two numbers set the same, okay? So your far right two knobs, your lower right, those numbers should be the same. All right, or very close to. If you walk around with the knobs for like 2 hours before you get a perfectly looking overlock, and these tension knobs are set to vastly different numbers, like let's say you finally get it to look right and one of them is on an 8 and the other one's on a 2, okay, take it to a service person. See if they can adjust what's going on behind the scenes so that both of these knobs can be the same number and with a mid-range number. For instance, you don't want it set perfectly on a mid-weight fabric, but this be on a 1 or 2 on your knob, because then you have no lower range left to adjust it to be looser at that point, if that makes sense. For a rolled hem, you want the fabric to have enough overlocking tension to cause the edge to roll just a little bit inside that tunnel of wrapping threads. It's not meant to look entirely flat like a serged edge. See this? This is not pretty, okay? This is what happens when you adjust your settings when your serger is set up for rolled hem, but you've adjusted it to serge. Okay, this is the result that you're going to get. It's not pretty. So you're going to kind of want to use your machine one way or the other on serge with a nice flat, more spacious kind of stitch, or this rolled edge. And obviously I'm focusing on this not just because this is what we have in the shop, but with my channel focusing on, you know, bridal formal wear hems, things like that. We're not ever just doing a regular serge edge on a dress. It's always going to be this finer rolled hem. So this knob over here on the side, we're going to look at the side of the machine here where we got a couple knobs. This knob is what controls the stitch length. 90% of the time, it's set to the capital R, which stands for rolled hem. Now, again, like I said earlier, if we have a lot of yardage to edge real quickly and it doesn't need to be pretty, we crank this up to like 2 or 3. Here's an example of how the settings change the look on bridal fabric lining. Here's rolled hem set at my home base, as we call it. This would be moving from left to right, 4 7, 7, and R. Here's a rolled hem with a long stitch length. So the far side knob is set to 3 instead of R. The tensioners are all turned down by 2 numbers to give it the lead that it needs. Now, when I say lead, what I'm talking about is picture riding a horse. When he needs to jump a creek, you have to give him more lead because he's going to stretch out and get longer, right? It allows him to stretch his neck out. That's the same thing we're doing with this thread. By loosening the tension, we're giving it the lead that it needs to make these longer stitch lengths. So we're making our knobs from left to right read 2, 5, 5, and then the one on the side 3. To go back to the pretty settings, I move it right back to 4, 7, 7, R. Now this lower knob on the right side, this is the differential feed, okay? I rarely change this, so I have it very clearly marked. If your fabric looks stretched, sprung, or has what we call a lettuce edge beyond what is fixed by ironing, okay? Notice I'm saying that because some of this you'll see I'm sampling on this scuba fabric and it looks a little bit sprung, but it's not truly sprung. When I steam or press this, it still lays flat. So if you see the stretching or the springing not fixed by ironing, then that is when you're going to be adjusting your differential feed. Now, as always, if you have questions, leave them down in the comments. I'm happy to help whatever capacity I can. Just keep in mind, I'm a professional seamstress who makes learning to sew easy. Hit subscribe so you don't lose track of me.